I recently got a comment on one of my videos about how to fade out all of the tracks in Pro Tools. And at first glance, I was like, well, that's really an easy, obvious question. But then I thought about it, and it's actually not. There's a lot of ways to do this, which could all give you different results in a way. And you might have a specific reason for needing to not do it the simplest way. So I'm going to show you 3 different ways to fade out tracks in Pro Tools, and I'm going to explain why you might want to do each of these different ways, because while they are all fading out the tracks, they are not all equal. So let's get into it. Hey and welcome, I'm Owen-Flood, thanks for watching, and yeah, let's just get right into it. The first one we're going to look at for fading tracks in Pro Tools is called clip fading. So that is when we're actually fading the audio files inside of our session. So looking at these, I've got a bunch of guitars loaded up, and it's fading these clips themselves, not our routing. Now, I want to note that you should stick around because this is the least likely way you're going to want to do this, I would think. If you're trying to fade out all the tracks in your session especially, this is probably not how you're going to want to do it, but you will want to have fades. So let's look at this. Just to show you what we're working with, here's the guitars. There we go. So if we wanted to fade those out and have the song just kind of like, have a fade, we can just fade them all like this. Now, a couple ways to do that. You can highlight all of the tracks you want to fade, like so, and then click F. That does a fade across anything highlighted. Or you can make a group and fade them. So I've made one called G All here. To do that, highlight the tracks you want. So I just grabbed all my guitar tracks, Command G, and then label it whatever you want, and the globals will already have the volume linked to it. So now when I click anywhere inside of the guitars here, you can see that it highlights all of those tracks automatically. And I can just do one fade like that, done. Now, have a listen here. Fades out, right? So, accomplished. But also, because we grouped it, this is actually something I hadn't thought about, but bonus. If we look at our volume automation, which we can do by clicking here, holding Option and clicking volume, and I automate volume in, it also does it to all of the tracks in that group, of course. So you can do this. I've just got guitars up to keep it simple, but you could, of course, make a group for all of your audio tracks and do it that way. You could fade the clips themselves or automate a volume fade into them. But that is kind of not how you're going to want to do it. But at the same time, it's something you're going to want to do every time. You should always have a fade in and out of every clip, essentially. Otherwise, you could have audio pops because the files aren't closed properly, essentially. So in general, there should always be a fade at the end of your file, but it might just be a tiny little one depending on what you want. You might not want to actually notice a fade. So for example, if we didn't want this to have a dramatic fade out and it ended like the song currently does, with a sudden ending, I would just do a fade on that silence, like so. And then the song ends that way. But we remove the risk of a pop because we've put a fade there, essentially. So it's always good practice to have a fade, but that's not really creating a fade out for the song. It's one way of doing it, but it's tedious and not the easiest way to go about it. And you have to make a group and you might miss some audio files and all of, a big session, this could go wrong. So let's look at our second option now. And again, the third option's the one you're probably going to want to do when you're finishing a mix, for example, and putting a fade out on a song. But the second option is really useful and actually might be used in conjunction with option 3. So let's now look at that. And that is fading your groups or your buses. So if we look at this, I've got a guitar folder here. So it's kind of like a guitar bus. All of my guitars, if we look at these, all the guitars in the song are routed to G all bus, which this is receiving. So I can hide it like that, and all the guitars are going here. So instead of having to select all those individual tracks, I can just automate a fade right onto this bus. It's a volume automation curve, right? As simple as that. Now, we could do that for all of our tracks here. So there's my drums, there's my bass, and the reason this is kind of cool is because you might want your drums to fade out earlier or later. You can really decide for yourself. Let's just make those inactive. So in this case, what I've done is I've faded the drums earlier and the guitars don't fade out at all. So you have more control where you could say, hey, I want just the drums to fade out. Right? Opposed to how it was before, which obviously I prefer, but you get my point that if you wanted that, you have that control by doing it like this, but it's also still quicker than going through and doing every individual track itself. You're just getting the groups. That requires you to have your session routed in a way like this and organized into kind of sub-mix groups, but I highly recommend that anyways, just for organization and ease of mixing. All right, finally, third and final way to do this, and this is the easiest way and kind of a finishing touch I do on every mix I ever do, and that is putting the final fade on the master bus. So I actually like to do it on my master bus that I've got routed, but you of course could just make a master fader, which is a really easy way to do it, and again, write automation. So look at this. Right, you can see the curve I just wrote in there, and that of course fades out the song. You could do it from earlier, and I actually like to do it kind of by ear, just listen to it. But in general, like in a song like this, I actually would do it a little differently. Again, I always fade out the file no matter what. So like I said, I would do it here on the track, on my master bus where I have my processing. There we go. Even though the song's already like ended and gone to silence, I still put a fade in just to make absolute sure that there's no like quiet information that's just going to get hard cut. It's always going to have a gradual fade there just to end the clip and end the song, and again, avoid any pops. But if you did want to have, like a classic rock fade out, you can of course do that. And you can do it writing it like I'm doing now, or you can just, use your pen tool and poke it in with a mouse. Totally up to you. I like doing it this way, and then I usually refine with a mouse if I think it needs work. All right. So there are 3 ways you can actually alter the clips themselves. You can go after your individual groups and buses, or you can just use your master fader and do it there. Now, one bonus tip for you, I think that's worth mentioning, that's kind of fun, is if you do want to have clips faded, but you need them clipped all over the place or faded all over the place. And this is kind of actually more in line with what the comment actually turned out to be, the original person that brought up this idea for a video. Say we had a bunch of audio clips like this. See, now that's a clip, and these are all individual clips, of course, within themselves, but we wanted them to all have 500 sample fade. We can highlight all those tracks, hold Command F, which is our batch fade window, and now you see that we can do so much here. We can adjust a fade in for the track, a crossfade, or a fade out. Now let's just only do a fade out. And I said, well, let's go in for, let's try 10,000 milliseconds. Sure. Boom. Now all of those clips have fade outs. See, did it to all of them. Didn't do it to this one, because there was already a fade that I put in there in my earlier example. So it ignored that one, but I think you can actually get it to adjust existing fade outs. There you go. Now they all have it. So you can do that across the whole session if for some reason you needed to, which you probably won't, but it's kind of fun to know either way. All right. Kind of a quirky, easy one, but the more you know. If you enjoyed it, please do subscribe. Would love the support. Thank you for watching, and I'll have another video coming up for you right here. Adios.